Right. For those of you who are here today, we are delighted to be with you. It's 11:02 and counting. We're going to wait for a few folks to join us. But welcome to the Build a Better Grid for Texas webinar. I have with me John Costello and Tim Figura, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a moment. My name is Andres Carvalho, and I'm the CEO and founder of CMG. Most of you, or many of you, know me as the Chief Information Technology Officer at Sentient Energy from 2003 to 2010, where I had the pleasure of working there and building all kinds of things, including the first smart grid. And today we are going to spend some time going over some content that I think is very relevant to what the grid needs and the challenges that the grid is going through. The agenda for today is a quick welcome, which we're finishing right now. Then I will make a quick presentation on CMG to give everybody an update on where we're up to and talk a little bit about, more importantly, it's something that we have been doing for about 8 years with about 25 utilities across the US, Asia, Latin America, and Europe, in the Middle East. And it's our smart grid roadmap methodology. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. Then we'll switch gears and move to Sentient Energy, presenting today. We're so glad that they're here and agreed to participate in this webinar to help folks learn a lot more and in more detail the technologies that are possible that many utilities are using to solve some of these key problems or challenges on the grid. And we'll let John Costello go through that, and Tim will be assisting him. And then hopefully we'll have an interactive session. So we're encouraging you to go to the Q&A button, or you can go to the chat button, whichever you find easier, and post questions and comments. Happy to address all those. If we run out of time for some reason and do not get to address them all, we will respond to you directly via email. Once again, we're trying to make the session as interactive as possible, even during the presentation time. So I will pause, John will pause, and kind of ask for questions or comments or anything like that. We can answer some of those on the fly if they're easy answers. If not, we'll table some of them to the end for the 15-minute Q&A session. So hopefully with that said, why don't we just go around real quick? John and Tim, if you can introduce yourselves, take a couple of minutes.
Sure. My name is John Costello. I run global sales for Sentient Energy. I've been here just over a year. Prior to that, I've worked with companies such as DNV and ABB. And I'm glad to be here today. We'll go through some monitoring and some grid edge control. And Tim will be here to support me. Tim?
Hi, I'm Tim Figura, technical sales engineer supporting our sales team. I've had about 14 years utility experience doing distribution automation, substation connectivity, power quality analysis, and I've been involved with line sensor technology for the last 10 years.
Brilliant, brilliant. So let me switch gears real quick on my slide deck. Hopefully you can all see my presentation now. And what I want to do is I want to really take a moment to walk you through our company and what we're doing related to smart grids. So we have been for a while pushing the envelope on bringing this vortex of smart cities, smart utilities, smart buildings together, primarily because these assets are getting digitized, and they used to be separate domains, but they're all coming together now for many reasons. And obviously, when you think about it, building a house being a single element of huge importance to a utility, water, electric, or gas, right? And also being a huge element for the city in terms of right-of-ways and transportation, pavement, access, code, and all those things. So these worlds are finally coming together, and so we have been really focused on that since 2014, and we have had a great run helping many utilities and cities automate 100% with the goal of full digitalization, decentralization, and decarbonization. So this is the list of some of our key companies and customers that we have been working with and helping over the years. It's not the entire list, but a significant list. And so you may see some interesting logos. And then real quick, we have two major events that we do every year. Our Digital 360 Summit, which is coming up September 26th through the 29th. You're all invited and welcome to attend. We will forward an invitation for you to attend. And the Sentient team is actually going to be at that event with many other companies sponsoring and participating. And then we do a weekly digital roundtable talk where we have had many superstars in the industry over the years. So let me get real quick into the smart grid roadmap. So basically, there are 5 elements to the roadmap that we do for any utility. There's an education and visioning session where we kind of talk about the art of the possible, what's going on in other places and other utilities, what are the key top use cases, or some 54 use cases that utilities are deploying of all kinds of things from wildfire to sensor detection of all kinds of things, from using drones to watching the lines and monitoring things to anything related to conservation and optimization of the grid, right? Once we do that and you have kind of understood or caught up with what's going on all over and what's possible and what kind of new products and technologies are available, we are sort of agnostic to all that. Then we do an assessment of your current state. We have several surveys, and then we do physical reconnaissance of a lot of the things that are going on and take a look around the service territory and all that. And then we kind of create that, kind of state of the art phase 1, assessment of what's going on. And then based on the vision and the kind of the desire of some of the things that you have learned in the education and visioning session, we come up with a gap analysis of where things could go and where things are. And that generates basically a roadmap and a timeline on the use cases. You choose which use cases are important to you, of the 50 plus. And then we spend time mapping all that out and suggesting, best technologies, best practices that turn into sort of the building blocks or the elements for potentially RFPs, requests for, information or questioning or procurement. And in some cases, utilities also ask us to build a project management office for the transformation. The last element that we do on the road mapping is we spend quite a bit of time on funding strategies and the execution plan. So we help create all the sort of top-down strategies on how a transformation would actually take place, including change management. So, in the end, what we're helping you is deal with all kinds of disruptions that are happening in the industry, and helping you move from what we call today the multiple versions of the truth. This is actually the architecture of Austin Energy in 2003, which had 31 single points of failure, and then help you move to a new architecture that really integrates all the elements in a seamless way. And the most important thing of all this is really collecting the data once, and then publishing and subscribing that data to the right elements and buckets in your infrastructure, including potentially the customer infrastructure. So we also help you with the journey of what is the Smart Grid 1.0, which is really generation, transmission, substation, distribution, automation, plus metering, basically the infrastructure that you run as a utility, and then help you create an architecture that delivers that in an integrated fashion. And then beyond that, we help you move to Smart Grid 2.0, which is really what a lot of people are chasing now, because it includes the elements beyond the meter that have to do with the infrastructure that the customer manages. So things like, your smart appliances, your energy storage of the house, like a power wall, if you have one, or any other technology. If you have solar panels or anything smart like pool pumps and water heaters and things like that. And so that architecture looks a little different because you really need to come across with different kinds of ideas and technologies, potentially using the cloud, and potentially using maybe third-party services with with a distributed energy resource management system solution as a service of such. And then, there's clearly a difference between running a smart grid 1.0 and a 2.0, and we help you understand that, and help you also understand the process transformation and the sort of changes that will need to happen, and perhaps the redeployment of staff, full-time employees that will need to be, not necessarily let go, but more importantly, recommission, repurpose. And so there is a great opportunity for that, and as you transform and change systems and processes. And so in the end, you end up being able to deliver a new ecosystem of an integrated utility, right? Depending on the marketplace, if you're vertically integrated, or if you're on the deregulated side of Texas, right, there's different stuff. But for the most part, you're going to really be enabling and being part of a new ecosystem of what's happening. And so a lot of lessons learned in terms of the fact that we need to manage new infrastructure on the telecommunications side, on the fact that we need to deploy new technologies that enable new things at the edge of the grid and on the power lines, primarily on the distribution side of the grid, that needs to be totally transparent, monitor and control in a way that has never been before. Hence the webinar that we're doing today, and having the Sentient folks talk about, CVR and VVC and VVO and many other things. And then ultimately this whole nation of creating virtual inertia and mitigating to DC for premises and microgrids, and reimagining a grid that is different in how it was sort of a central power plant utility focus, and now switching back to a distributed grid that includes systems and generation at the edge and synchronization and all those challenges. So there's a maturity model on that we have created that utilities use to basically map the journey and the growth of that. And so in the end, one of the things that you can do is read my book about it, and spend some time, understanding better all these challenges and concepts, but more importantly, what's really going on and being done in many places. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to let John jump in. John?
There we go. I believe I'm up. I'm going to share my screen as well. I believe folks should be able to see it now.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the way, I hope that didn't shrink it. The way that I envisioned this going was basically this is going to be a conversation. Again,
it actually did shrink it, John. I don't know if you can make your screen as big as possible on your monitor.
Okay, it is. Let's try one more time.
Yeah, the prior view was a little bigger.
Yep.
Yeah, that's smaller.
Bigger?
That's better. Yeah.
Okay. All right. There we go. Went to full screen and you couldn't see it. So as we discussed earlier, this is going to be kind of a conversation. I'm with Sentient Energy. You'll see some slides. We'll distribute these slides after this session. You'll see some slides in the back with a little bit of information about Sentient Energy in our portfolio. We're going to focus this on building a better grid for Texas. So if we were to think about what would we do differently? If we were to build the grid today, it probably wouldn't look like it does today. But we're kind of stuck with what we've been given over a century of build out. So what can we do on the grid now to enable some of the functionality that we would like to see? So at Sentient, our mission is to create an empowered world where energy is accessible to all. That's a grand vision. We do that by enabling decisions using grid edge technologies. In our case, it's line sensing equipment and grid edge control to help orchestrate the transformation of the power grid. If you think about things, it's really hard to manage what you can't see. So our solutions are really focused on bringing visibility, what's going on the grid, into the control room. We provide innovative solutions and services to help those utilities improve reliability, save energy, and enhance power quality to enable the transformation of the digital grid. How we help utilities. We can improve reliability, improve power quality, enhance system planning, realize energy savings, increase DER hosting, and facilitate proactive maintenance. We'll kind of go through that as we talk about some of these use cases. I really can't see when folks ask questions, so maybe it's a small audience, maybe we can blurt it out. Or Andres, if you can see them, call it out to me.
I will.
Okay, thank you. So at Sentient, we have, we'll call it a complete distribution system coverage. We have overhead sensors, we have underground sensors, and we have grid edge control devices. If we look at our entire portfolio, we use our MM3s at the substation. We'll talk about the use cases in that a little bit, but basically that gives you visibility outside of the substation. We use our ZM1 on laterals, which is essentially very similar to the MM3 in terms of functionality, but battery powered for those circuits with low amperage. Then we have our MM3s and MM3 AIs on three-phase feeders. That's for monitoring once you get out there on the grid beyond the substation. UM3s for three-phase underground circuits, UM1s for single-phase underground residential distribution. And then we have our NGO, which is going to be replaced by our VC10 device. And that's really for grid edge control. And we'll kind of talk through that a little bit as we go. So again, we have two different, we'll call it two different groups of in our portfolio, line sensing and analytics, and then the dynamic for our control. We'll talk about the sensors first. When you see some of the pictures up here, we have our MM3 and MM3 AI for overhead feeders. Those are basically powered using harvesting core on the lines themselves. Again, where we don't have enough amperage to power the device, we go with our ZM1, which has a 10-year battery. And then for underground, we have our UM3 plus, and we can actually go up to 12 phases on an underground cabinet if we look at the underground distribution. And then for UM1, that's really for like a single phase transformer. We also have our software, which is our Ample Analytics Pro platform, which also enables device management. And who at the utility would be interested in seeing some of this information? Well, obviously, when you take a look at things, you're looking at isolating faults, you're looking at phase balancing, the loading that you have on feeders, analytics, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. That information goes to the ADMS Network Center. It can go to various groups for perhaps it's distribution planning, power folks in charge of power quality, and then also fleet deployment and maintenance managers. And that's a little bit on the being reactive as well as proactive when we talk about analytics. Again, I only have about 180 slides. We'll get through these pretty quick. It's more like 25. So if we're trying to get some visibility on the grid, you probably want to place sensors in strategic locations. You get to a point where if you put too many sensors on the line, you have the point of diminishing returns, and you really haven't improved the economics of the of the project whatsoever. So again, we talk about just outside of substations, and that would be at the feeder head. And that's to give you some visibility downstream, and also kind of for those substations where you don't have SCADA. We call this like SCADA Light or poor man SCADA, if you would. It just gives you some information about what's going on there at the substation in out in the on the feeder. Adjacent to key switching locations, that's kind of a no-brainer. Also, it's useful to have it between an overhead and an underground transition. Uh, Looking at non-communicating protective equipment, we'll talk about a use case in that in a little bit as well. Difficult areas, that difficult area could be places where you already have poor performance of the feeder, where you might want to be monitoring that more closely to see how things are going and capture information. And then, of course, on laterals. Some of the benefits that we get from monitoring, you have improved situational awareness. So basically, you're seeing stuff on the network that you hadn't seen before. You can capture disturbance data for analysis, which you can then pass on to the appropriate teams within your utility. And the easier use cases to think about quantitatively are improved safety with our analytics platform, and then improve crew management, which has a lot of benefits, but it also leads to better safety. We talked a little bit about phase ID. So with monitoring, if you're monitoring each and every one of the phases, what you're able to do is every 24 hours, we're doing a phase check. And that has lots of benefits, but number one is really improving your load balancing on the feeders, and also improving your capacity with that load balancing. And then it's also data validation that your GIS, your OMS, your DMS, that they're all in sync. And excuse me, and you get a better quality on that fault detection as well, because now you know exactly which sensor faulted, which phase it is, and what equipment's associated with that, perhaps. Overhead feeder restoration. This is where we get into a reduced SAIDI score, as well as improving the efficiency of your crews. So if you look on the left where it says pre-solution, essentially you have a fault out there. I'm going to turn my pointer on, I hope. Nope, that's not working. So under where you see the green, that's where the switch is. You can see a fault just below that. If in a normal situation, if you didn't have monitoring, all you really know is that that fault is somewhere out there in one of those sections, one of those areas. So you would dispatch 1 or 2 crews, depending on the length of the feeder, to go out there and find out where this fault occurred. If you're doing some monitoring, what you can see is you can actually determine the location of the fault. It's downstream of this sensor, upstream of this one, and you can direct a crew to a particular location. And the savings that you get there is really dependent on number one, how you patrol the lines. Do you go to the middle and then work your way out, or do you go to the end and you work your way end to end? But essentially, sometimes it's chance on how well you did. Maybe you guessed right and you sent the crew to the right location the first time. In this instance, we're able to send the crew to the right segment of that feeder initially, which can reduce by far the number of hours that it takes to get folks back on. We like to cover it in minutes. We'll talk about some of the metrics on that in just a moment. But essentially, depending on how many sensors that you put on the feeder, you can get more and more granular so that you know that a fault is within this specific span. And we see most of our customers, they will either bifurcate the segment itself so that there's just 2 areas or perhaps 3 areas, but we've seen some as many go down to there's 6 different areas on segments on that circuit. So they've reduced their response time, and we'll take out the chance that you guessed right the first time. On average, you can reduce it 84%, but you can see a significant savings on average in CMI in reduced manpower. So for one particular utility, you can see here that there was a fault, and using sensors, we were able to reduce the inspection distance by 66%. So they were able to go to one specific segment of this feeder to see what the issue was. Our accuracy, we have 90% accuracy of the fault location if you're using more advanced software and circuit models. This particular customer, using our sensors deployed over their system, not it's not 100% penetration, but more on the problematic feeders. But they were able to save 22.3 million CMI over 2 years. So if you do some quick math, depending on how you value a CMI, which could be anywhere between 75 cents to $1.50 or $1.75 per CMI, depending on what the feeder is and where it's located, et cetera. Average value in that range. This was roughly, even if we're just saying $1 a CMI, that's $22.3 million savings over 2 years. This was not a $22 million platform. So the savings and the benefit that you see are relatively quick. Gary Ayer, who's on the line, likes to use the phrase fast time to value. Essentially, for sensors, you can put them up with a hot stick. You don't have to take an outage to do so. You can put them on the lines while they're live. And once you deploy this, they can be up and running in a matter of days. It takes approximately 15 to 20 minutes to install a triplet. That would be 3 sensors, 1 on each phase. And if you're doing a number of circuits, you can pretty much get a number of circuits done in a few weeks with a couple of crews going out there. They come up into our system within minutes in our Ample system, and we're able to start generating information, not specifically on the predictive aspect of it, but certainly when it comes to fault location and reducing SAIDI scores. Any questions or comments thus far? Actually, I think I see a number in chat. Nope, that's just you, Andre. Sorry. And if there's no questions, we'll just move on here to.
There's actually a quick question.
Okay, sure.
From Kevin Clark. Are current expediting sensor networks unable to utilize the more advanced monitoring software to better isolate fault locations?
Existing sensors brought into our system.
Yeah.
Currently, not now, not for predictive. Obviously, the dream is that we're bringing in multiple data streams from multiple devices out there. Right now, we're dependent on our sensors because of the richness of the data they provide. For the MM3, the overhead, we're talking about the granularity of the data is such that we can, I think it's 130 samples per cycle. So if you think about that, that's, at 60 hertz, that's what, 7,000 samples per second. We're able to construct rich waveforms. And we'll talk a little bit more about the analytics a little bit later. Once we go beyond grid edge control, we'll come back to analytics. But for right now, the answer is no. In the future, yes.
Thank you. Keep going.
Yep. Looking at underground, very similar situation here. This is a little bit more complicated than the diagram I showed before, but if you're looking at, this is prior to the installation of underground sensing, you can see here that there's some overhead sensors on the lower right-hand quadrant. You can see one there in the section that's faulted. All you know at this point is that you have a fault. You don't know if it's overhead or underground, and it's somewhere in that red highlighted area. This is before you do any underground sensing. Once you do underground sensors coupled with the overhead, you're immediately able to eliminate the overhead. You know where the fault is, and you eliminate certain sections of that underground network. So you can direct a crew to that location with the right equipment. Now, patrolling for faults can be problematic when it's somewhere between overhead and underground. So essentially you eliminate the overhead first, then you start working on all of the cabinets. This could be a multiple hour process, but if you know where that fault is on which particular phase, you can go right to that area to see where that to address that issue and bring your customers back up. And with appropriate switching, you're able to isolate the fault. And so we like to say that we make Flizzr better. So we're able to tell you where the fault is and where you can use your reclosure scheme to come back in, not coming in on a fault, but just basically minimize the number of affected customers, which also reduces safety. We'll talk a little bit about the MM3 AI. This is our overhead feeder monitoring system. This is for feeds our analytics platform. It has an integrated power harvesting design. We can go down to in that 12 amp range in terms of installation of this. Below that amperage, we would use the ZM1. The ZM1 is a little bit different. It doesn't feed into our analytics because it doesn't constantly provide data to preserve battery life. It just wakes up intermittently and transmits the data. And that's how we have a 10-year battery life on that. I guess you could get it to wake up every hour and send information if you wanted, but you would dramatically reduce the battery life. For the MM3 AI, with our Ample software, we're able to provide fault location and fault notifications we can issue. Excuse me, daily reports, summarized load data. We do the auto phase ID that confirms that conductor phasing. And then we also have, you can work this in conjunction with the ZM1 for that fault segmentation. So one of the use cases for our ZM1 is paired with reclosers out in the field that are not communicating. That means that you can actually see when a recloser actuated and what the status of that recloser is at any time. If you look at how the ZM1s and the MM3s interact together, they're all brought into our Ample system, which does the analysis. And that's where, in conjunction with the circuit models, you can get down to the fault location and also feed your ADMS. So you can go in on those Flizzr schemes. On the underground, we call it the UM3 plus, but we can go up to we'll call it the UM12, where we can do 4 feeders, 3 phases each. It's powered a number of ways depending on the current. We can go with a single core for the harvesting, or a dual core down to 9 amps. We'd like to see that 9 amps overnight, or we can go direct powered as well, AC. If you're looking at the UM3, the installation is pretty easy to go. It's magnets on the back of the device that it just essentially is magnetically stuck to the side of the cabinet there. And you can see where you can see the coils, and you can see where the power comes in, and then you see the antenna up above the device there. Essentially, you would drill down through the cabinet, mount that antenna on the top, so you have a visual indication outside of the cabinet as well. All of our devices can be used on an Itron network, any sort of mesh network, as well as AT&T, Verizon, or any private LTE. Southern Company, in our instance, we are on the Southern Link system for our Southern Company installations. And again, with that Ample integration, you get all the same things that you get out of the MM3. The UM1 is a newer product for us. This would be installed on a single phase pad mounted transformer. Goes inside. You can see here that it's always messy when you open up one of these transformers, but you can just basically drop the box right there on the ground. The installation goes fairly quickly. Again, this is going to be, in this instance, this will be LTE. We prefer, because of the amount of data coming in, we do some, we'll talk about this in the analytics, but we do some parsing of and classifying of the data that we're seeing prior to it being sent up to our system. If we see something that we recognize and it's a normal operation, like a normal switching operation downstream, we don't bother setting that information up. We've classified it and we kind of park it to the side. The UM1 is great for continuous monitoring of the transformer. We're looking at both the primary and the secondary side. And we can, because we're able to continuously monitor that transformer, that goes right into the transformer health. So, as you overload a transformer, you start to break down the insulation and you've reduced the life of the transformer. Many cases for these even pole mount units, but for the pad, you see that many transformers are becoming more and more overloaded as you get more load placed on the grid. As the grid moves, as society moves more towards an electrification of all things, including vehicles, you're seeing, you're seeing EV charging systems. You're seeing PV, which is doing generation. You're having energy storage system behind the meters, and this helps you monitor. What where the power flow is going. The direction. You also know what the loading looks like, so you can look at that transformer as saying, "Hey, I've noticed that this transformer is perhaps rated for." It has a certain rating in that it's at 110% of that rating for 4 hours every day. And it coincides with when people are coming home from work and hooking up their EV chargers. So I know there's a lot of issues to be addressed on the grid as more and more EV chargers come into play. Vehicle to grid charging is going to be big as well. But heating systems up in the Northeast, people are moving away from natural gas, going electric and heat pump. What's going to happen is not only you're going to have to reconductor some neighborhoods because the conductors themselves can't carry the load, but a lot of the primary distribution apparatus, like a transformer, may need to be replaced. It's not like the old days where all the transformers were oversized. Things are getting pretty tight in terms of the allowance and what kind of margin you have on that transformer. This gives you some indication as to how that transformer is loaded and what you might need to do in the future. Here's some nice pictures of that UM1 installation. This is IP68, so this is where you just essentially you can drop this this box right into the base of the cabinet, and you can see it kind of messy there. You see a lot of wires, a lot of dirt. Essentially, because of the ease of the installation, I believe that for the UM1, most of the time is really spent in drilling the hole in the cabinet for the antenna to communicate. Other than that, the installation is pretty simple. Before we move on to grid edge control, are there any other questions on the sensors that we just talked about?
Yeah, there are a couple of questions. The question is, does the solution detect current direction reversal due to solar injection from a microgrid or DER?
Yes, we're monitoring the E field, so we're able to determine the direction.
And then the other question is, what is the estimated total savings to utilities when data analytics are applied using your solution?
We'll go it a little bit. That's really comes in the safety reduction. It depends on what the value of the CMI is, and then where they do. If you were to install sensors on every circuit, it might be cost prohibitive to do that. But if you're just doing it on problematic circuits, the payback is relatively quick. We can go through some of the metrics in just a minute with one of our other customers, but essentially, I think we're seeing we'll call it a simple payback of less than 2 years.
Got it.
In the analytics.
Okay.
Did I get all those questions?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Right. Grid edge control benefits. So grid edge control, you'll see the device in just a minute, but essentially when we're saying grid edge, we're saying on the secondary side of the transformer, we're able to control the voltage. Once we control the voltage, we can optimize the voltage and then reduce the voltage on the primary side to see some conservation voltage reduction. Also addresses power quality and allows for that greater adoption of DERs per feeder. We have some utilities who install our NGO devices strictly for VVO CVR, and we have others who do it so that they can get a deeper penetration of DERs on a specific circuit. And we can see about a 180% increase, 150 to 180% increase of DERs on a circuit using grid edge control. The concept is, well, I got one slide first. On the hardware side, you can see it here on the pole. We also have the pad mounted version as well. Installed on the service side of the transformer, 32 samples per cycle, has communications capability, communicates up to the utility, and it has an autonomous control of the voltage fluctuations. But with our software, you can actually set those voltage set points. You can look at the status of the feeders. You see all the volt bar data. And you can also have a schedule for your voltage set point because at certain times of day, you might want different voltages or perhaps even seasonal. This is a really messy graph, but it's kind of easy to talk to, and it's for me, it's kind of intuitive. On the left, you see the normal operation. As you know, we're looking at the voltage on the secondary side of the transformer now. You see that the voltage itself fluctuates quite a bit between the lower and the upper ANSI limit. So that means that on the primary side, your voltage has to be really high to keep that voltage above 114 volts. Now, with our deployment of the device, we're able to optimize the voltage. This is a capacitor banked, it's a capacitor solution rather than an inverter-based solution. So all we're doing is putting bars in. We're able to get that range really tight. So that's what we call on the control side, on the optimization. So we're getting that bandwidth so that there's not as much fluctuation. Consequently, because we're able to control the voltage, then on the primary side, you can set the go to LTC. I don't know if it's going to be dynamic or set manually if you need to send a crew out. You can lower that voltage on the primary side. So with the implementation of grid edge control on the secondary side, typically we see about half of the overall energy savings and about, let's see, I think it's close to 40% on the peak savings, rather than just controlling on the primary side. LTCs have been in existence for a long time. People have used LTCs to basically drop voltage. But if you're able to control on the secondary side, you can drop it even further. And what we've seen is that about 50% of a VVO CVR program, the savings are seen by controlling the secondary side. We have a number of clients who are implementing this now. It typically involves a rate case for investor-owned utilities to go ahead and make this investment because essentially you're saving energy, so you're no longer seeing the revenue associated with that energy. So there's incentives in many states. I can name Ohio, Massachusetts, Colorado, New Jersey. They all have rate cases that support this type of technology for VVO CVR.
I got a couple of questions, John.
Sure.
So one question is, you all recently announced a harmonics module on the MM3AI. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. I actually have a slide on that in a little bit, and I'll get to that a little bit later. I see this next question. What exactly does sentient energy mean fast time to value? So when we say fast time to value, depending on the selection of the circuits that you're installing sensors on, we can install, if these are things that we've planned and we have them in inventory, upon receipt of a purchase order, typically it's a 4 to 6 week lead time, unless we have it in stock. And the installation is relatively quick. You can do a single crew, if I remember my math correctly, can do about 2 to 3 feeders per day. So if you have multiple crews doing this, within a week, you could have your sensors hung. Within minutes of the sensors being hung, they're starting to bring data back to Ample. And if it's a problematic feeder where you're doing the segmentation, you can start seeing immediate benefits to your SAIDI associated with those particular feeders. And I know that most folks keep track of which feeders are problematic year over year, and if they get to be problematic over a longer period of time, they're super critical, and that's probably where you're starting to focus on upgrading that particular circuit. So when we say fast time to value, we're talking about the order of days rather than months or years. And again, we also make FLISR better. So if we do an integration to an ADMS, we're able to help out on the payback on the ADMS. But that's a longer type of endeavor because typically there's integration required.
Got it. There's one more question.
One of the grid edge, capex for during transformers. Yeah. So that's a great question. So if you're looking at we'll call it a non-wires alternative. So if your distribution planning group is looking at a circuit and you're saying, hey, based on our models in 2026, no, let's say 2025 in July, there's going to be an 8-hour period where that transformer for that circuit is going to be overloaded. Great. How much is it going to be overloaded by? Perhaps it's only going to be somewhere in the range of 3%. Not a big problem. But if they say it's going to be overloaded by 3% for a longer period of time, that's problematic. They start putting it into the CapEx plan to replace that transformer. A solution here would be much less expensive, which would be ENGO devices, which really act as targeted energy efficiency on a circuit. And you can still see the energy efficiency gains if you go behind the meter and do some stuff as well. But typically, you could see a 2.5% shave of the energy. And again, it's going to be like a 1.5% shave off the peak. So it's very doable to go in there if you have some sort of non-wires alternative plan to address that. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at lost revenue because the customers are using less energy downstream.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Carry on, John.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I know I'm short of time here. SAFE. So now we're going to get to the analytics, and we'll talk about the harmonics module. Essentially, all the information that we have comes from our sensors into our applied analytics engine, and then this enables folks to make informed decisions. So now we're talking about predictive. We'll talk about that in just one moment. Let me look here. Our analytics platform, what we're doing is we're monitoring these circuits and we're looking for disturbances. We're looking for anomalies. Sometimes we know what those disturbances are as a normal course of business, switching action downstream, et cetera. We're able to classify these anomalies or these events or disturbances into 2 categories, actually more categories than that, but currently, if we say that this is impactful to the system, we can tell you if it's from vegetation or from equipment, and we can tell you when we're starting to see anomalies. So you can see here we have circuits that are good, in watch, in warning, in alert. And we can see that time, we can see that information. Sometimes it's days or weeks in advance, sometimes it's hours in advance. If it's hours in advance, you might not be able to dispatch a crew to do something about it. But if you have 24 hours to go out there and get a crew out there, you can actually go out there, do some proactive maintenance, if you would, without having to have a great number of customers affected. We'll get to the harmonics in just one moment. If you're looking in terms of what's reactive versus proactive with our solutions, we know that we can do some prediction on circuits based on these disturbances we see, either vegetation or equipment. And given that, we can look at avoiding safety, basically reducing safety and avoiding an outage altogether. The best outage you can have is one that you never have to take, right?
Yep.
So here we have preventable, what we call actionable, and then informational. Sometimes you don't get a warning or a precursor event prior to the event, or not enough time to be reactive. So you can assign an economic value to this. And we've done this with some of our customers, and we've seen for relatively small dollars see multiples of their investment come back in avoided outages. And we'll go to harmonics first. So harmonics, why are we launching a harmonics module? Well, we find that harmonics are useful to folks when they're looking at their system. So with more and more renewables coming online, we're seeing in EV charging, we're seeing harmonics introduced to the system. And for our overhead sensors, we can see up to the 22nd harmonic. With the UM1, I believe we can see to the 100th harmonic. So we can see things that are unusual, harmonics being introduced into the grid that most equipment cannot see until it becomes problematic. But you can see things in certain harmonics that are indicate that there's a transformer having an issue because of EV charge. So you can see this, and because it's information that we already have, it's really simple to just publish that information with some additional code, et cetera, and provide these reports to customers, especially out in Texas, in oil fields and so forth. Harmonics would be particularly of interest.
Yeah.
Then finally here, we'll talk about a specific incident for a customer using our analytics platform for predictive. Day one, we started to see some anomalies. We notified the customer and we said, hey, this is probably vegetation. What they ended up doing was they went out there and on day two, and they said, we didn't see anything really. We kept getting this information. We dispatched the crew again and said, hey, there's something out here, but it is vegetation and we think it's in this area. Lo and behold, they did go out there and find it. And there was discolored leaves and they were able to see that, but they also found a lightning arrestor that had a hanging jumper on the load side. That arrestor was replaced within a week, so that was proactive. Their estimation was about 30,000 CMI impact, so they were able to reduce by about roughly, if you say it's $1.50, that's about $45,000 outage avoided. So when we're looking at predictive, the value is on the safety side, but it's also customer satisfaction. If you start looking at JD Power scores of consumers with their utilities, they're becoming more and more prevalent. And for public power, it's a little bit different, but there is that perception as well. So any outage that you can avoid is beneficial to the customers and to the utility.
Right. There's one more question, John.
Yeah, let's see. Total today over voltage. Fixing over voltage issues. Well, yeah, we have a roadmap where we're looking at inverter-based technologies for the grid edge control. Currently, we're not able to take it out. We're just able to put it in. So we are looking at buck and boost in the future for our grid edge control devices.
Okay.
And then lastly, grid analytics enablement. Basically, we like to sit down with folks when we start looking at sensor technology and grid edge control and looking at what a holistic solution is, an approach to the utility. And it involves more than just us giving information. It involves change practice at the utility so that they can be responsive as well. So to be proactive rather than reactive, perhaps it's dedicated crews that are just being proactive versus waiting till something fails.
Right.
And that's what I had for you today, other than backup slides. I know I went over time. I did speak as quickly as I could, and I had just about 30 plus slides in there.
Yeah,
So
no,
I'll,
that's wonderful. We answered several questions as well. I'm wondering if there are any questions from the audience now that you have seen the whole thing, and maybe John, go back to your slide. I don't know if your opening here had a little. If you go, there you go. So maybe leave it there, and you know, when I remember sort of the key elements that people were interested in learning more, easier crew management, affordable conservation voltage regulation, volt-var control, volt-var optimization, better grid reliability, improved situational awareness, easier capturing of disturbance data, and so on. When you, John, you didn't mention some of your key customers, but you got many: Florida Power and Light, PG&E, and many others.
yeah.
Can you put your finger on the dike on, you know, if I'm really seeing some of these challenges, where's the low-hanging fruit? Where should I do first? What could I do first if I wanted to do a pilot or test something?
First would be for distribution substations that don't have SCADA,
Mhm.
just hanging three MM3s outside on your feeders, one per phase on the feeders coming out of the substation, gives you
Mhm.
a lot of visibility as to what's going on there at the substation and also downstream. That's where we see that's an Alabama Power use case, which has been published, where they're
Mhm.
using it for poor man's SCADA, for lack of a better term. We
Mhm.
have other customers who are using our ZM1, pairing it with um, reclosers, non-communicating reclosers out in the field, so that they get some more visibility as to when a recloser actuated, and then also in addition to when did it open up, but what did it see before that, and that could be captured by our sensors as well. And then finally, it's just really the segmentation of problematic feeders that go where it's difficult terrain. And by segmenting a feeder into quadrants, you can reduce your patrol time by, on average, 75%.
Yeah. 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 I see so many drivers. I think back about my days at Austin Energy and when we were trying to improve our game because we were focusing on bringing more CNI customers, fabs, Samsung and AMD and many others that have moved and expanded dramatically. Samsung is now adding a $30 billion fab to the service territory. And there's a significant amount of need for better quality of, power quality, better harmonics, better modulation, no flickering allowed, right? Better power factor, this and that. And it seems like you guys have significant amount of choices to sort of dabble into that, and it helps safety and safety and other things.
Certainly. And I welcome anyone that's interested in learning more to reach out. My information will be in the deck that I send over to you, Andres, for distribution. And yeah, more than happy to talk to folks about running a pilot and seeing how we can help build a better grid for Texas.
Yeah. So I know that we've gone over. I don't know if there's any other questions. I don't see any others. We will be circling back with you folks. Thanks for attending. We're happy for the opportunity And we are excited about, a new series of webinars that we're putting forth to really help out and reach out and sort of peel the onion about all these technologies that, in my opinion, have been around for a while now and are not as fully deployed as they could be to really make the grid a true two-way power flow, two-way data flow, any generation, location, more capable. And obviously with electrification and transportation, eventually the notion of allowing for or enabling the ability for thousands of EVs discharging back into the grid and synchronizing all that is going to really require a new thinking on the architecture and the infrastructure. Any final thoughts, John?
No, again, we thank you for the for the invite to present to this group. We're eager to help out the great Republic of Texas, and looking forward to working with folks to make a better grid for Texas.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thanks everybody. We will sign off and look forward to visiting with you all and following up. Thank you much, John. Thank you, Tim. And thanks everybody for attending today.